Welcome to Conversations with Passion with your host, Corey Poirier. This is the show that brings you the nuggets of wisdom and experience to help you pave the path on the way to your own shining moments of glory. And remember, if you want to hear the show again, go to conversationswithpassion.com to listen to any of our archive shows. On our show today, we have Canadian singer, songwriter, and missionary of hope, Justin Hines. From the Business Breakfast Club Atlantic Executive Director Beth Pye, the Learning Forum with me, Marco Kelly, Adventures with Corey, and our featured guest is Canadian champion rower Silken Laumann. But first, here is your host, Corey Poirier.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the latest edition of the Conversations with Passion radio show. I'm your host, Corey Poirier, and this time around, I just wanted to maybe kick in a food for thought, if you will. First and foremost, before I even get to that, I hope that you're having a fantastic week and finding ways to live with passion every single day. But in terms of the food for thought, I've heard for so many years the quote, if you will, that there's no I in team. And, just a food for thought in relation to that quote, I've often thought to myself that I'd like to take that quote one step further and maybe analyze or investigate that a little further, because there may not be an I in team, but there certainly is in team achievement. Or even if you take it the team, there certainly is in achievement. But, if we look at team achievement as two words and put the I back in, I actually think that it's important that each member of the team works to their best effort individually to make the team a better team overall. So I think sometimes the unfortunate part when we think there's no I in team, we all try to say, I want to contribute equally. But as we've known from history, sometimes the best teams are when each individual is giving their absolute all within the team, while at the same time being conscious of and working toward a common goal within the team. You can look at almost any walk of life, like sports, look at, Wayne Gretzky or Michael Jordan. I'm sure they would tell you that the team themselves, being surrounded by the right people and having those team members made all the difference. They didn't do it on their own. But imagine if those two guys didn't try to be the best Wayne Gretzky or Michael Jordan they could be. If you look at both cases, they wouldn't have as many championships as they did. And again, that was a lot to do with them being the best individuals they could be, while also making the team work as it needed to work. So I wanted you to consider that. I mean, you can look at different walks of life, like business. Steve Jobs, imagine if he didn't try to be the best individual he could be, and just essentially said, let's make sure I don't contribute in a bigger way than the team, and I don't try to do anything individual from the team. Imagine the technology we wouldn't have today. Or if you look at bands, being a musician myself, I can tell you that within bands, you have to be conscious of the team members, or the music won't sound right. I mean, you have to be conscious that you're part of a group effort in relation to music, but at the same time, you have to give your best performance individually within the team if you want the band to grow and stand out. So I just want you to think about the fact that there may not be an I in team, but there certainly is in team achievement. So as long as you're taking the team into account, you're working toward the betterment of the team and a common goal, I don't feel there's anything wrong with also trying to be the best you can be, achieving at the highest level you can be, and not dropping your own goals and efforts down to meet the team, whereas that might actually hinder or hurt the team. I think you're supposed to try to be the all you can be and put the I back in team achievement.
If you're ever looking for a hero, then look no farther than Justin Hines. Gifted singer-songwriter, born with Larson syndrome, a joint dislocation condition that keeps him in a wheelchair. In the summer of 2013, Justin Hines and Canadian duo Ash and Bloom embarked on a North American charity tour, traveling over 12,000 kilometers and giving 100% of ticket sales back to over 70 charities. His latest album, How We Fly, was released in Canada on May 14th and marks a new path in his journey. In January of 2014, Hines was awarded the prestigious Order of Ontario for his charitable work and international success. Here is a conversation with Justin Hines.
And how could I've shown? So say what you will before it's too late. Say what you will, and say what you will before it's too late. You say what you will.
Hines, thank you so much for joining us on the Conversations with Passion radio show. And Justin, I'd like to start things off for some of our listeners who might not be as familiar with your background, to get you to perhaps maybe tell us a little bit about your background and how you spend your time these days.
Well, I've been pretty obsessed with music since I was a little kid, and luckily as I got older, it became a career of mine, and I'm feeling pretty grateful for it. I've had tremendous support in my lifetime to, follow things that I've been passionate and excited about. So, just like one of those lucky few that have had that opportunity.
And so with the music, maybe I'll start from, right off the top about passion, because, of course, the name of our show being Conversations with Passion, we often talk about the importance of it. So, I guess maybe I'll start off, Justin, by saying, well, first of all, I probably know the answer to this, but I'll ask the question anyway. Is music your passion? And if it is, why do you think it's important for somebody to find their passion, and why was it important for you?
Yeah, music is definitely up there for me. I can't deny that. Since I was very small, music has been it's been a wonderful outlet and sort of a vehicle for me to do lots of things. It's been a form of expression. It's been therapy. It's been a career. It's been it's been a connector for me to meet a lot of great people, and it's just meant so much to my journey. And I think not all of us sort of know early on what our passions are, but I think in kind of the journey and searching for it and finding it is, to me, equally as important as actually discovering what that is. And I think, for me, the journey of music has been as amazing, if not more, than the actual, music itself. So it's just one of those things where it's been at the core of, who I am and what I've done for so long that just feels like it's a part of me. So been fortunate.
And, Justin, one of the things I get asked often, and you can tell me if you get asked this often, as somebody who has found their passion, and, I'm sure other people can feed off that and feel that you have your passion and that you're, you're living on purpose. So maybe I'll ask you, Justin, do you ever get the question from people, how do you recommend I find my passion? And if you do get that question, or if you've ever had that question, do you have any kind of recommendations or what you may have said to them in terms of how a person could start that process of trying to find their passion?
Yeah, I've definitely gotten that question a lot. And I think, when you start, being really sort of honest with yourself and really kind of vulnerable, I think it's amazing what kind of, reveals, what kind of things reveal themselves. So I think, a lot of times we're afraid to pursue the things that we might be into for fear of, fear of judgment or fear of, failure and all these kind of things that might get in the way. But, the reality is, like I said, my opinion earlier is that it's the journey of going for it, not necessarily obtaining, whatever it is you want to obtain. So, I think just bringing yourself down to really kind of a vulnerable state where you're really just honest with yourself and others and the world around you. I just think that's when a lot of amazing things can happen. And I would say that, from my own journey as well.
Well, Justin, what I'd love to dive into, and, especially for some of our listeners who may not be familiar with your background, you have a rare genetic condition. Is that correct? And if so, how has that kind of impacted your life and impacted the work that you've done over the years as well?
Yeah, I've got this thing called Larson syndrome, and it's a joint condition, and I've been in a wheelchair my entire life. And, it's definitely presented its share of struggle, but also its share of unique kind of joys as well. It's an interesting thing, I think, having, physical adversity, because I feel like in many ways your mortality is kind of staring you in the face quite often. And, as challenging as that can be, and as, struggling, it can really sort of break you down sometimes. I think you also develop a very unique perspective on life if you're kind of got your head around it. You learn to sort of find a way to deal with it and accept it. I think it's amazing, what that kind of adversity can do in people. And I've seen that. I'm not talking about myself necessarily, but in others where it gives people a level of empathy and understanding, they might not have had otherwise. So I've learned to embrace it, and even the struggles. It's not a perfect road, but we become better, I think, from after overcoming challenges and obstacles.
And has that led to, because I believe you're involved in different, and have been involved in different fundraising events, and has that played a big part in it? Has that, played a big part in your decision to be a supporter of charities and to become involved in fundraisers?
Yeah, I mean, there's a natural connection for me, to the disabled community, but I often get asked, very directly, what is your cause, Justin? What is your thing that you're passionate most about in terms of, the charitable aspect thing? And, to me, it's not really about a specific cause or one particular, charity or anything like that. I've always been just really into the concept of charity and just living sort of a charitable life. And I don't even mean necessarily go out and, giving people a bunch of money or doing, all kinds of things, like walks and stuff. It's amazing. But to me, it's just living a life where every once in a while you think about somebody else, rather than just ourselves. It's easy to become an island and to become very sort of, self-focused. But the minute, we take ourselves out of ourselves and just for a brief moment think about somebody else in need or somebody else that might need a bit of support, then I don't know. I think we just really open up as people and really kind of grow. So for me, it's more about just the concept of being charitable rather than the actual deeds themselves.
Well, there's a neat quote that I've heard many times by a guy named Jim Rohn, who, and I'm paraphrasing it best, but it was something along the lines of, it's not about what's at the end of the journey, it's about who you have to become to finish the journey. And it sounds like for you, whether it's the music or whether it's even the idea of finding ways to give back, it sounds like for you it's maybe more about the journey than it is about just simply the destination.
Yeah, I guess, when you think about it, the reality is our journey could end at any moment. We kind of take for granted that, our lives, for the most part, are pretty fragile. So there's, pretty good chance we might not ever get to our quote-unquote destination, but we do, have right now. It's what we know. So might as well sort of, put our attention on that and the now rather than, always looking so far ahead. I think, you kind of got to go with what you know sometimes, and this is what we know. So that's kind of my theory.
I love that, though, because I never, until you just said that, I never thought from that perspective of the fact that, we have now, and that's all we have, and, that means if we're on our journey right now, we have that part of the journey, but we're not guaranteed the destination. Yeah. And like you said, it's all what we do with what we have now, because if the destination ever comes, we never get a chance to prove what we could have done with the destination, or at the destination.
Indeed.
I love that. So, Justin, maybe I'll jump back into the music for a second, and especially, like I say, for some of our listeners who aren't as familiar with your music and all the things you've done, because I know you've done a lot in the music industry. Can you maybe tell us a bit about, some of the things you've done in music? Like, I know you've released a number of albums, and I believe you've had a lot of success, on the online side of things when it comes to digital downloads, videos, stuff like that. So can you maybe tell us a bit about your journey with the music side? Yeah,
I'll do my best. I've never really been too good at recapping, music stats and that kind of thing. But, we've had, I guess, 5 albums now and a couple of tracks that were on Billboard charts. And had my own TV special in the United States and Canada and traveled the world. And, I've really... I've had quite a journey, especially in the last 7 years. I never really anticipated. When I was growing up and even into my teenage years and into my early 20s, I always swore that I would be happy just, playing music for myself or my family and friends. And I truthfully never really had a lot of expectations for my journey, even though I thought it would be cool to be a, full-time music guy playing big shows and stuff. I never really thought it would necessarily be my journey, but the fact that it's kind of worked out fairly well is, it's a big giant bonus for me. So I guess I'm just trying to ride it out as long as I can. But I can't think of many things that I've got left on my, bucket list, they say nowadays. just keep them going. That's on my bucket list now. Keep going.
You know what? That's awesome though, because there's, I think a lot of people would feel pretty comfortable and happy knowing that, I've often said we're writing a book with our life, and to know that you can close the page and close the book and be happy with what was on the last page and also on the, the middle pages, that's a rarity. So, I think the fact that, like you said, that now the bucket list is just doing more of what you already love and what you've been doing, I think that's a cool place to be.
I appreciate that. It's funny though. I think, the people that are making music or even just doing a job that's completely under the radar is as important as, anything that I may ever do or people that get lots of attention. I think, every little spoke in the wheel kind of makes the wheel turn. So I never really thought of my journey as being, any more important, or don't really necessarily think I've achieved more than anybody else in music. It's just been, I'm just doing my thing like everybody else in the world. So try to keep that in perspective.
No, I think you're already on that path, in a big way, keeping everything in perspective. And just based on my experience of interviewing a lot of people, I think you already have that perspective, which is awesome to see. And
it's good to know.
Well, no, I don't have any doubt in that at all. And, one thing I wanted to ask you about, Justin, because it's something I've been having conversations with people recently about, and I'm, our show, of course, is the idea is to help people become, the best versions of themselves and give them insight for doing so. Mm-hmm. But I'm a musician as well. And so I have, we're putting out my fourth CD probably next month. So June, it looks like June 8th is going to be the release date. I'm actually just getting the first video done this Saturday, so my first video ever. And one of the things I've been having a lot of conversations about. Oh, well, thank you so much. I'm pretty excited about, especially the video. It's a totally, it's a unique experience. So it's always a great, for me, I always love getting that new experience that you never thought you'd have. And I have a question for you though on the music side that I've been getting lately now that I've, started talking to people about the upcoming CD, is people asking me, how can a person still make a living in the music industry? It seems like, everything is free online now, and if you go on iTunes, I heard a number the other day, like the average person, I think spends $40-some a year in their iTunes account, whereas years ago it might have been $1,000 on CDs in a year. So I guess my big question is, what do you think a musician has to do now to make a living or get by that may be different than 10 years ago, given the world we're in today with everything being available at a fingertip rather than having to go down to your local store, which may not even exist anymore? Like, what kind of differences do you think an artist has to take?
Well, it's an interesting question. I mean, there's so many uncertainties in the music business, and to be honest, entertainment in general, the landscape has changed pretty dramatically, and I think they're still trying to figure out ways to to generate revenue and have it be a big thing again. I think just ultimately though the bubble has burst a little bit. Like, it's just not as lifestyle version famous as much as it used to be. There's still mega star type people, and there's the people slugging it in the bars, but there's not a ton of middle class, I guess, right now. But I don't know. Like, I think you just got to keep figuring ways to branch out and be extensions of of yourself, basically. I mean, for myself and my journey, I really enjoy doing things like keynote speaking and just appearances that would be a little outside of the normal for a typical musician. And I think it's a way to stay kind of relevant and active. And the actual business of music might have changed a lot, but doesn't mean you still can't have a meaningful living if you stay at it. And I think nowadays it's amazing because I think artists really have to appreciate their fans and their fan base, because every one of them is a blessing, and so it's more of a normal kind of job nowadays. And I'm not really thinking that's a bad thing. To be honest, I kind of like that it's a little more human now.
To find out more about Justin and to hear maybe more of his music, go to justinhines.com. Next up, we have Beth Pye, Executive Director of BBC Atlantic, that is the Business Breakfast Club of Atlantic, a network organization that is committed to helping its members grow their business. Go to bbcatlantic.ca. Here is Beth Pye.
Thank you so much, Beth Pye, for joining us on the Conversations with Passion radio show. And Beth, perhaps I'll get you to tell us a bit about your background and about BBC Atlantic and how it all kind of came together for you.
Well, I guess about 4 years ago, I was looking for something to do with my time. Both my girls are in school, and I was really looking for something that I could really grab onto and that would mean something to me. So my background is actually in financial services. I worked with Investors Group for many years in administration, and I had family members who worked there as well, and I helped them with their businesses. So learning about networking kind of came as a natural thing for me. Basically, I saw how it worked for other folks who were working in the office and knew that it was a valuable piece to small business and entrepreneurship. So when the opportunity to buy Business Breakfast Club came up 4 years ago, I grabbed onto it, and I haven't really looked back since. It's been a great way to meet new people and to help them succeed in their businesses, and I get a lot of satisfaction out of helping people do that. So that's kind of where I am with all that.
Very, very cool. So I guess if we kind of jump onto that first, what your goals were and what you knew you were kind of jumping into and why you were jumping into it, what has it been like since?
It's been really good. We had a lot of, I guess, background in that, knowing that one of my family members, that's how his business grew right from the beginning to the end. It was the good word of other people and them passing referrals on to him based on his, what he did for a living and how well they felt he did it. So it's kind of a neat opportunity for me to walk in and help other small businesses do that as well. It's really been a very gratifying experience for me. Certainly members come and go, and that happens in every business. But I really have to say that it's really rewarding to watch other people succeed and be able to place them in a situation where that's a possibility. It really is quite gratifying.
Well, I guess if we dive into the networking side of things then, Beth, because obviously I would think that you now have more experience with networking than you did before you started getting to hear what other people say and feedback and all that kind of good stuff. Do you have a few tips for us based on what you've seen that seems to work better with networking versus what doesn't work as well?
I think really it comes from a place of sincerity and looking to build honest and true relationships with people, because that's really what it boils down to. It's about building those what end up being mutually beneficial relationships, and the fact that you have to get to know, like, and trust people before you're ever comfortable, sending business their way, because you want to make sure that, they're going to be a representation of the service that you've provided. You want their service to be an extension of your own. So really it comes down to getting to know, like, and trust people, and really it's all about building the personal relationship and getting to know people, not just, necessarily at a once-a-week meeting, but taking the time away from those meetings to sit and have a coffee or a phone call just to get to know each other and become more familiar and learn what each other is about, so that things can progress just naturally down the road. And
what, obviously Halifax, Atlanta, Canada is its own market. So what led to your decision to, I guess, open or buy the business in Halifax and Nova Scotia and Atlanta, Canada? And at the same time, what do you like about this region and doing business in this region?
Well, I guess what I like about it here is I find that business people are really real. They want to make sure that before they make an investment in anything, that they make sure that they're getting the most value for their dollar. So you deal with people who are just shoot straight from the hip, and they say, I want to know if this is going to work for me, and you kind of just go from there. And it's my favorite part is that I love to go and meet new people and talk to them and find out where they are and with their their networking and how it's working for them, and if they're having some issues, I've kind of picked up some things along the way that just I get to share that with people, and that makes, again, it's very fulfilling for me.
No, that's very cool. And I guess then, the Atlantic side of things, obviously, I shouldn't make any assumptions, but I believe whenever you purchased the business, it was mainly Halifax or Nova Scotia based. And right now I know Atlantic's in the name, so I guess what are
That's
the thoughts
right.
there, and why did you go that route?
Well, I think that, networking and building those professional relationships are vital for any business, regardless of where they are. But Atlantic, Canada is where I'm from. It's where my family is, and it's what I know. And I know that the way business is handled in Atlantic, Canada is different than it's handled in other places. So it's what I know. It's familiar, and I understand how it works. So that's sort of why I decided to do that. And Nova Scotia, it was when I bought the business, Nova Scotia was an existing market on its own, and I really believe, like I said, it's a vital piece to any business, and I would like to be able to take it to New Brunswick, Newfoundland, and PEI down the road. It's in my sights. I don't have any set plans yet, but it's on my radar. So I just think it's an important piece, and I'd like to share it with the other provinces as well.
And is Nova Scotia home for you, Beth, or?
It is.
Your roots?
My roots, actually, no. I'm a transplant from New Brunswick. Moved here when I was very young, and I've been here. I've been here since I was in grade 3. So even though I wasn't born here, I feel like this is where I belong. So, but certainly New Brunswick was where it all started.
Well, funny. One of the things that I've noticed over the years is I'm, as you know, I think from our conversations, I'm an Islander. And what's funny to me is that PEI has this kind of thing where you're either the person from the island or you're the person from away. And there's that whole thing of you're either born on the island, and you move away one day old, you're always an Islander. And if you move to the island at one day old, you're never an official Islander. The cool part I found about moving to Nova Scotia is Nova Scotia is a lot different that way. Like if I look at Halifax, you become a Haligonian the day you step foot in Halifax, which I think is so cool.
Yes, absolutely right. Very welcoming group of people here.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, being an Islander, I can say it's not that, PEI or even Newfoundland is a similar type thing. It's not that those places, of course, aren't welcoming. I mean, they're the kind of the salt of the earth type people. But it's just there's some kind of, you're either, I guess, you're on the in crowd or you're not.
There you go.
And, it's like funny. It's just because we want to let you know you're the come from away person. But that's not necessarily a bad thing. But I just love how in Halifax, it's everybody's a Haligonian, almost like Toronto, I think, because there's so many people from away. I think it's the difference.
Yes. You're right.
It's kind of cool. So I guess then if we delve, in a different direction then, what are your long-term plans for the business in terms of what would you like to see the business become? And, if I tap onto that a little bit as well, how do you define success, Beth?
How do I
define success?
How do I define success? Okay, well, I'll start with the first question first. So, like I said, long term, I'd like to bring BBC Atlantic to the other provinces as well. And like I said, it's on my radar, and I want to, but before I go ahead and expand out, I want to make sure that everything is running properly and smoothly, and it's easily, duplicated, because basically I wouldn't be able, obviously, to visit all of the provinces every month or anything like that. So you have to make sure it's easily duplicated so that someone else can follow through, and I would then be a resource to that person, and so on and so forth. So that's kind of how I hope to move it along once, down the road. And as far as my definition of success, really I think that if I get the chance to help someone else succeed, I find success in that. And that's really what this is all about. I get into this business because I truly believed in the power of networking. I've seen it work. Even today, my life is based on networking, through my own business, but my husband's as well. And I know how well it works. I've seen it work many times. So I really believe that I feel successful when other people are successful when they're networking and members of my organization. I just think that that's probably the best definition of success that I could have.
On this segment of the Learning Forum, I'll talk about not striking out before you swing the bat. There are many times we come face to face with a challenge, something that brings out our fears, our doubts, our worries, or the voice in our heads that say we can't do it, we won't win, we'll fail. In my youth, I faced such challenges and heard those voices, and many times I talked myself out of even trying. They say the things we regret in life aren't the ones we did, but the ones we didn't. The ones we were too scared to muster up the courage and give it our best shot. I've heard people quote the Yodel line, "Do or don't do, there is no try." And I've even seen the great Tony Robbins use it on a lady in the audience to illustrate the point by asking her to pick up the chair she was sitting in. And when proceeding to pick it up, he said, "No, don't pick it up. I just want you to try to pick it up." The thing is, that works great on tasks like picking up a pen or a chair, but for less tangible things that you aren't aware of whether you're capable of doing them or not, the best thing you can do is to try. Like running 5 kilometers or 10 or a full marathon. Sometimes you don't know whether you can do it. And if you take the approach of do or don't do, sometimes that voice in your head wins. Because if you think the odds are stacked against you, you make the choice to fold rather than go all in. Sometimes you just have to take the approach of, let's see. Ready, fire, aim. You try. If it doesn't work, you reset, adjust, and try again. A few years ago, I was given the opportunity to speak to the faculty at a university about leadership. My first reaction was that I couldn't do it. Why? I'd never been to university. I was supposed to go. I'd even toured the campus. But then my dad got sick, and I went to work to help to look after the family, and I don't regret that. I endeavored to learn, and to this day I'm still constantly feeding my mind with books and audio programs and great conversations with people I admire and respect. But that voice of self-doubt was loud in my head that day. What could I possibly have to teach these highly educated individuals? What could I say that would make any difference to them? But in the end, I quieted that voice in my head and I did the talk. I said, let's see. The talk went well. I had people come up to me at the end saying it was the best talk in leadership they had heard. I got the feedback scores afterwards, and they were good, but not as good as I had hoped. Some loved the talk, some not so much. But I learned from the feedback. I learned from what people liked about it, and I learned from the feedback that was negative. And it helped me become better and deepen my understanding. But what I learned the most was that I could say shush to that voice in my head and take on those challenges. And having done so not only helped me learn, but I also don't have to carry around the regret of not having gone after it. Sometimes you don't know if you don't try. Not trying is like striking yourself out before you even swing the bat. Sure, there's a chance you might strike out, but if you don't even swing the bat, you have no chance of hitting a home run. With that talk, I didn't hit a home run, but I didn't strike out either, and I got a number on the board. So the next time you're faced with a challenge that you're not sure about, instead of talking yourself out of it, say, let's see, and give it your best shot. It's like they say in negotiation. The answer is no before you begin. Beginning is your first step towards a yes. The rest is up to you. Adventures with Corey.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to this edition's Adventures with Corey. Kind of a strange thing to call an adventure this time around, but as you can probably tell if you listen to the radio show on a regular basis, to me, adventures don't have to be, big, let's say, quests across the globe or the world, or something that has a big action associated with it. An adventure can be whatever an adventure is to you. And so to me, adventures relate to a lot of different areas of life and a lot of different actions. And so the latest adventure for me is just going back and rereading classic books that have impacted my life in a big way years later. Now that I've maybe gained some extra wisdom throughout the years since, it's kind of cool to go back and reread the books and see, what you may have missed that time around, or what you may not have understood in the same way that time around, and have a new perspective on maybe an old powerful message. So the latest book that I've kind of dived back into is Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill, which was in essence the second book I ever read in my life. As everybody who listens to the show on a regular basis knows, the first was Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People, and that's actually going to be my next read again. I've read them both multiple times, but again, back to Think and Grow Rich. What a great adventure to go back and reread that book. I have to tell you that for me, personally, I took probably more from the book this time than I did the first time around, and the first time the book transformed my life. So once again, never be scared to tackle an adventure you've already done in the past before. And, in the case of books, what a great adventure to go back and reread a book, a classic book that maybe you took stuff from before, and see if it changes the way you perceive things now. Much like watching a TV show or a movie that you haven't seen in years and maybe didn't realize a big actor was in it before they were big, and you knew you liked the performance, but now you can go back with the perspective of knowing all the catalog of work they've done since and viewing it from that perspective. So yeah, maybe an adventure to you means just going and backing and listening to an old album, listening to or watching an old movie, or reading a great classic book, and having the adventure of doing it with a new mindset. Hopefully you can find a way to use that. Until next time, I'm Corey Poirier.
Up next, we have Canadian rower who won the silver Olympic medal in the 1996 Atlanta Games and bronze medals for the previous 2 Olympics, as well as gold medals in the Pan American Games for 1987 and 1995. In May of 1992, just 10 weeks before the Olympic Games, Silken Laumann was injured in a rowing accident that resulted in great damage to her right leg. Although told by doctors she might never row again, 4 tough weeks later, Silken was back in her shell, ready to pursue her Olympic dream. When the starter's pistol rang out on August 2nd, 1992, Silken made the greatest comeback in Canadian sports history, winning the bronze medal for Canada and capturing the hearts of a nation. To learn more, go to silkenlaumann.com. And here is the conversation with Canadian Olympic medalist Silken Laumann.
First and foremost, thank you so much, Silken, for joining us on the Conversations with Passion radio show. And perhaps I'll jump right into things. Maybe I'll start right from the top to talk about your new memoir. Maybe to, talk a little bit about how that all came together and what made you decide that it was time to share some of these life lessons.
Yes. Well, I think I had to be in a place in my life where I was ready to share so openly and make myself as vulnerable as I have in Unsinkable. So first of all, I had to understand how events, especially growing up, had an impact on me and made me into the person that I am today. I also think in order to write Unsinkable, I had to get to a place where I was less attached to what people thought, and was willing to stand up and own my story. So I reached that place. I started journaling. I was given a lot of encouragement during that process from a couple of my friends who every once in a while I would send bits of my writing to, and they kept saying to me, this would help a lot of people because your journey is so similar to so many of our journeys.
Wow. And so releasing, a memoir, I guess this is something that we don't typically think of when we think of the book process. I've been down that road multiple times with books, but I haven't done a memoir. And I guess you said, getting to a spot where you were okay to share those things. I guess, does a memoir, from your experience thus far, does it involve a lot of vulnerability, to allow yourself to be vulnerable to share some of these experiences?
Yes. Vulnerability has been part of this whole journey for me. Being able to put myself out there in a way that could open myself up to criticism. Certainly, it changes the image of, Silken Laumann, this person who can overcome everything, who, is always strong and happy and kind of invincible. That what I'm sharing is the times that I'm not invincible and that I make mistakes and some of the things that happened as a kid, and how those affected me today. So I think there's been a huge process of allowing myself to be vulnerable in Unsinkable.
Yeah, I have to say that I guess my background as a speaker, one of the things I learned, and it took me, sadly, took a lot of time to learn this. I've shared it on the show, so our listeners know this, but it took me a long time to allow myself to be fully vulnerable, i.e. sharing things like I didn't read my first book until I was 27. For some reason, I was embarrassed by that. I graduated high school with a 49 plus 1. Knowing a teacher gave me that plus 1 to allow me to graduate. And for some reason, I thought, there was some reason to be embarrassed about that. But I have to say, my experience has been that once I revealed those and shared those things from the stage, I had more people say, you seem relatable, you seem human. Thank you so much for sharing that, because I've always been in the same place and was scared to share that with people. Have you found, since you released the memoir, that's kind of what you've experienced, is that people were actually grateful that you were that vulnerable, and it actually helped them more because you were that vulnerable?
Well, I think making ourselves vulnerable, we make ourselves real, right? And most people respond to that, and certainly it's only been a few months since I released Unsinkable, but I find the kind of conversation that I'm having with my audiences, the kind of conversations that I'm having, via Facebook and Twitter and everything else, it's a different kind. It's more open. People are sharing with me their own struggles with depression and anxiety, their own experiences with growing up with a parent with a mental illness or an alcoholic parent. And so, most people, when they share something like that, that's a very personal, often private thing that they're sharing with me. So by doing that, it creates this connection, and I get that they're sharing something that's hard for them to share.
Yes, it's such a powerful thing. And so, I wanted to, I guess, before, I'd love to take us in the direction of talking about some of your background and powerful things like finding one's passion and what does success mean and all those kind of things. That gives you kind of a preface to what I'd like to talk about. But just before I go there, I like to kind of jump on things while it's still hot and while I'm still thinking about it. So you mentioned the keyword Facebook and social media. So I have to go there because that's something that has obviously changed in recent years and is impacting all of us in terms of how we communicate. So, how important do you feel social media is these days when it comes to, for example, brand building or relating to and engaging with the people in your life, from a customer perspective or from a person like, for this example, a reader perspective? How important do you think social media is, Silken, in terms of the world we are today? I mean, some people say, oh, it's a fad. Some people say, I love the fact that social media exists. Some people aren't fans. So I guess, where do you sit? Is my big question.
Well, I would say I'm still learning. I'm probably the generation that it's certainly not second nature to. I have 4 teenagers, though, so I'm seeing my kids from 14 to 18 and how they interact with social media, and my challenges in always trying to balance those real life friendships with the connections that they're making socially. And you certainly see how there are absolutely dangers in social media, especially as it pertains to young people. But there's also this great part of social media, which is the connection. And as an author, that connection's been really nice. I'm just learning. I'm really new to Facebook. Facebook still sort of scares me a little bit. I find Twitter, I'm getting the hang of a little more, and I find because Twitter's just so many characters, it's just a good way to let people know where you're at. Where on Facebook, I'm getting those bigger questions and conversations happening. So I find I'm a little bit more leery of what I post on Facebook and how I respond to people on Facebook than I would if those messages came in just through my website and I was answering things in a less public way. I don't think it's a fad. I think social media is here to stay. It's certainly, from the perspective of a parent of 4 teenagers, I see how interacting through the web, through the social media, is a whole different way of interacting. And I have just an example. Last weekend I was at a young entrepreneurs conference, and this young gal was telling me about this idea she had she was already building a business around it called Dropbox. And it was a way of storing your belongings by a box rather than a container. And she said she'd come up with the idea by, being on Dropbox, the electronic version, and thinking, wouldn't it be cool to make this real? And to me, that was such a great demonstration of how opposite. Like, I would have thought it the other way. I would have thought, oh, wouldn't it be cool to take something that's real and make it virtual? Her paradigm. It was a complete paradigm shift, right? To think of it in the opposite way.
Yeah, that's awesome, and it just goes to the fact that social media, as you mentioned, Facebook. I've been on it since 2006, and I'd love to tell you I got it figured out, but it keeps changing quicker than I can. So I don't have it all figured out yet by any stretch. But absolutely, I'm seeing there's definitely. I mean, I won't deny that there's some negatives, perhaps, at least from my perspective. But for those negatives, there's definitely a lot of positives. I.e. the way that I'm able to connect now with people that I couldn't before, and get to know somebody before I actually do business with them, without them really maybe knowing that I'm getting to know them. But at the same time, like you said, to trigger ideas and maybe allow us to see what could be that doesn't exist now. So, I love that perspective that, like you said, there's a whole paradigm that you can take more than one perspective of social media and kind of make it work how it has to for you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I love that. And so, I guess I said I just wanted to ask quickly about social media. So I wanted to jump, perhaps, Silken, into maybe your career today. Being a speaker myself, I have a great appreciation for the speaking field and speaking world. And, I love when somebody's out there sharing their message and reaching and impacting people, from the stage and then, one-on-one whenever they get a chance to after this talk. So what do you think maybe drew you to the speaking world, and what do you like about speaking, and maybe even if you wanted to talk on coaching as well?
Yeah, thank you. I think that I always think of myself as being in the business of translating my experiences and connecting with people through communicating, whether it's writing, and writing really is as big a part of my life now as speaking, writing, speaking, connecting with people before and after my presentations. I feel that I've had this extraordinary life and these opportunities to have experiences that not everybody gets to experience, but they are also universal in the lessons that I've learned through these experiences. So, of course, being an Olympic athlete is one of them. Only relatively a small number of people are able to do that, certainly to go to 4 Olympics. And, but beyond that, I sort of use the experiences that I have in my life, and I talk about them, and I share what I've learned. I've always been a person who's been deeply committed and stimulated by lifelong growth and learning on a spiritual emotional from a spiritual emotional perspective, and so that's what I'm able to do with my speaking, and I feel it's such a gift. If my experiences, the way that I've processed this and thought about it and worked through it, can be helpful to other people and maybe speed up their learning curve, I just feel like that's just this incredible gift. And the coaching part, that's a new part of my life, and I just finished my training a year ago. So with the publishing of the book, I haven't done a whole lot of it yet. So I think that's kind of the next chapter of life for me. And one day I've got aspirations of doing other things, but ultimately the speaking will be always part of something, always part of what I do.
So that's kind of intriguing in the sense that I'm curious, did you ever think, back whenever you were, jumping into an Olympic life and career, did you ever think that the afterlife could involve speaking and writing? Did you see that at all as a possible option or something that you were excited about, or did that just come to nowhere?
Well, I dreamed of being a writer from the time I was a kid. I always wanted to be a writer, and maybe particularly it took me a long time to learn to read. Maybe that, and then when I discovered books, I discovered books early, kind of in grade 4, it was the first time I read a whole book, and it was opening up this amazing world. And the first book that I really remember was about Annie Sullivan and Helen Keller. The second book that I remember was about Anne Frank. So, they're all kind of real life stories that became, in one way or another, caught our imagination and were made into stories, books. So, and then even before I gained notoriety, I spent time speaking to high schools about my experiences in sport. So I think I've always been drawn to it, and although I was the person in public school that was afraid to put up their hand and answer the question, somehow my need to communicate helped me overcome my fear of communicating.
That's awesome. That's not something you hear every day, but that makes sense. One passion kind of outweighed the other, if you will.
Yeah. Well, I used to say that about my racing. I was terrified of racing. I was a nervous Nellie, but my desire to win was stronger than my fear of competing.
I love that. That's awesome. So I guess then Silken, since I guess I just kind of dropped the word passion, maybe I'll continue down that path. Obviously, well, I shouldn't say obviously. I never should assume. So when it comes to your Olympic endeavors, was that your kind of first passion? And I guess was, as you mentioned, wanting to write, was writing kind of another passion? And if so, I guess how important do you feel is it for a person to find their passion?
Well, I was very fortunate. By the time I was 12 years old, I had three major dreams in my life, all kind of begun with an experience, a connection point. So one was I'd watched the 76 Olympics on television, and I wanted to be the next Nadia Comaneci, the gymnast that won gold medals and scored a perfect 10. So that was the first one. W.O. Mitchell, great Canadian writer, W.O. Mitchell, came to our school and read from Who Has Seen the Wind. I was only a kid, but I remember that event, and it really left an impression on me. It left an impact. I wanted to be a writer since that point. And then it was the time, like when I was 11, it was a time where there was a famine in Ethiopia, and the television was full of, advertisements to help children in Africa. And that really, from that time, I said, one day I'm going to do something in Africa. And I've been volunteering and working with Right to Play, that brings sport and play to kids around the world and works particularly in Africa. So a lot of the things that I dreamed of when I was a kid have come true. Now, what I believe is great, but we have to constantly be reinventing ourselves and creating new goals and dreams that we have for our life. And I think if there's one extraordinary power that I possess, it's my ability to dream. To take the time to reflect on my life and really ask myself what I want to create, what I want to have in my life, what I can still do. And that's something that didn't end when I was a teenager. It didn't end when I finished my Olympic career.
So that I guess that drive and desire as well is obviously there outside of the dreaming of what could be. One of the things that obviously you did that not everybody does who dreams is you took constant action, it sounds like, as well, to make those dreams a reality. So do you feel that it's, because we hear a lot of talk about the law of attraction, and us being able to draw stuff to us, but I think sometimes we miss the action part in that word, in attraction. And so how important do you think it is for people to actually take action in their life and on things, when compared to maybe preparing to death and never taking action?
Yeah, well, I talk about the dream because there are so many people who hit midlife, and I think dreaming is something that's very natural when we're young, and as we get older, we lose that. We get more cynical. We get sort of put on an automatic pilot. So definitely, it's the first step. But of course, it all happens because we find the courage to take action, and really we work in a really persistent way towards the thing that we want. Because, like a lot of people will start down the path of something that they want, but then it gets hard, or it feels uncomfortable, or they feel guilty, or it's a change, and with change always comes emotional shift. It starts to feel uncomfortable. They start to go against the grain of the people around them, and then they go back to the way they were doing it before, and then they start again, and then they go back, and they start again, and they go back, and it's kind of my version of hell, which is you're into that discomfort phase, and instead of pushing through it and getting to the other side, you just keep going back to the starting point and then going forward and going back. So, action is absolutely necessary, but also kind of persistent action, action like that's really one foot in front of the other, working through the discomfort of change. And anybody who thinks that change, obviously that change does sometimes just happen. It happens because it happens to us. A marriage ends, and our whole life changes. We experience the death of a loved one, and our whole life changes. But the kind of change I'm talking about is the kind that we envision and we want for our life, that we want to create something different in our life, whether it's more loving relationships with our children. That doesn't just happen. It happens because we find the courage to do the personal work, to look at ourselves, to change ourselves in order to be different. I mean, if you want your family dynamics to be different, the person that you're responsible for is yourself. And when you do that, the people around you, it's like being a main character in a play. When the main character shifts, all the supporting characters shift as well.
Well, everybody, there you have it. The latest edition of the Conversations with Passion radio show. My 3 big takeaways this time around, first and foremost, was from our interview with Silken when she mentioned about the importance of working through the discomfort of change so that you can get to the ultimate change destination, if you will. And speaking of destination, my second big takeaway was from our conversation with Justin, whenever he actually talked about how important it is to live in and enjoy the journey, and how sometimes the journey can be more important than the destination, because the journey is sometimes the only thing we actually have. We're never guaranteed the destination or any more of the journey than we're on right now, so why not enjoy the journey and make the most of the journey while we're in it. And then finally, during our conversation with Beth, whenever she talked about networking, I love her answer in terms of what are some strategies for networking. And she said the biggest thing is about making sure that you are sincere and looking to build honest relationships that are based on trust. So I think those are 3 great insights and takeaways from this very episode. Hopefully you guys enjoyed them and took these away from the show. And hopefully, as always, you took even more than these 3 as well. Thank you so much. I'm Corey Poirier, and thanks for tuning in.
And with that, we conclude another episode of Conversations with Passion. As Corey mentioned, we hope you have something to hold on to as we leave you to think about a few things until our next show, where we hope to bring you more to think about. And on we go. To learn more about Corey Poirier, to have him come in to do a presentation to your group, team, company, or organization, go to CoreyPoirier.com. There you can also take a look at the books and CD programs that Corey has available, as well as read testimonials or watch videos, including the video to his new single, Your Jacob, from his soon-to-be-released CD entitled Evil Anthems. To learn more about the show, go to conversationswithpassion.com, where you can also sign up for email updates. And to learn more about me, go to marcokelly.ca. We'd like to thank the following friends of CWP: Think Marketing. Think like an adult, create like a kid. Go to thinkmarketing.ca. Atlantic Marketing and Appeal, Atlantic Canada's fundraising experts. Go to peelers.ca, peelers.ca. AP Reed Insurance, service first for you, apreed.com. TNT Safety Training and PEI. Oxford Learning, never stop learning. Go to oxfordlearning.com. Gear Maxwell, the branding provocateur. Go to gearmaxwell.com, GAIR. ABI Business Services, the services you need to help your business succeed. Go to abipei.com. And we'd like to thank you once again for tuning in. On behalf of Corey, this is Marco Kelly reminding you to live with passion.